All right, so we're continuing. I just want to be able to see the chat in case someone is trying to join. I think 14 is a good number. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yeah, I can see it, yeah.
All right, so I believe this is where we stopped. So we stopped at here. So basically, I said this is telling our application about our DB context. And we say options is options.use SQL Server configuration, get connection string, default connection. And why we have this here is because we need to tell our application where our database is. And the way to do that is by using a connection string. So the connection string is going to contain a number of things. It's going to contain our database name. It's going to contain where our database IP address and the username and password that we'll need to access our database. So that's what the connection string is. To add the connection string, I'm going to come to application settings.json. So this is called app settings, and this is where we add the connection string. A second, let's minimize this. I'm just going to pick the connection string from here. And this is it. Remember to put it in, it's just JSON, right? So you just create a section in your configuration file or your app settings.json. You just create a section called connection strings, and then colon, and then open and close, and then you put a value in there, and then you put the string. Now let's look at the string. I'm going to start from changing this. I'll just change this to, what's the name of this project? Demo web app, right? Your database name can be anything. I'm just using demo web app here. I'm going to clear this. It was just to illustrate that you can type that in yourself instead of pasting it in like I did. So I have connection string, default connection. Now I need to tell it what server I want to connect to. We installed local DB, so that is why I have local DB here. If I was actually talking to a server in the cloud, I would use the IP address of the server. To illustrate that, I'm going to show you one of my test servers. Let's see, I need a low risk registration, and now check the app settings. So for this server, you see I am connecting to a server called MySQL database, and you see I have the username and the password to that database in this connection string, because this is a database in the cloud. But in our situation here, we're connected to a local DB on our system. It's going to authenticate using our Windows username and password. So we don't have to put username and password here. Awesome. So coming back here, this default connection that we're actually picking up here is this default connection that we filled here. So what we're doing here is configuration. We're letting our application, yes, by the time you want to host it, we need to put an actual IP address. So we're going to put this here. In retrospect, right, what we can do is actually take this. We can take all of this and put it in this second file, app settings.development.json. And then at the same time, we can put the actual server IP in this file. Now, what happens is when we run our application locally, it's going to use this database. And when we actually put our application in production, it's going to use the actual server IP we specified here. Now, that lets us do testing and all of that and still have both of them. And the way it works is that when we're running an application locally, it runs in development mode. And you see, it uses our settings from app settings.development.json. When you put it in on a server, it's going to run in production mode. It's going to ignore all the settings here and use the ones here instead. So that just clarifies why we have two versions of this file. But for now, we're not putting this in on the server, so I'll just leave the same connection string for both of them. Awesome. So where did we stop? We're talking about registering users. So we've added this part. We need a new folder here. We're going to close all those files. We need a new folder called entities. And now entities are classes that will map to our database, like classes that will actually map to our database. Classes are going to be database tables. I'm not going to say much about it now. I think it's better if you see it. We're going to call this one application user. .cs. So once again, the namespace, you see I'm doing demo web app entities because it's an entity folder. And then I can say public class application user. And then for this application user, right, it's not just a plain class. I'm going to say it's inherit from identity user because I want to use this class to register users. So I need to say it's inherits from identity user. And for now, I won't put anything in here. I'm just going to leave it like this. And okay, so I have this class here. I'm going to come back to startup.cs. And there's this bit of code that I'm just going to pick up from here, just so I don't have to type in all of this. First of all, I'll take this tool here, use authentication and use authorization. This tells our database that, okay, we're using identity and all of this in this project. People need to be authenticated to access some things. We see one of them is already here. So I'll just add this tool here. And then I need this part too, this part. Now this is what we did where we said add DB context. And then we need this other one. It says add default identity. Do I want to use this one? Okay, let's just use this one and see. Anyways, the different ways to configure identity in your project. And here, remember we named that class application user. So I'm going to pass in application user here. And default identity. You know what? I think I'm going to go this way. I know this is that add identity of application user and identity role, because this application user identity role okay, I need to put in a user for this one. Let's see that entity framework stars, and I should do it. Application the context. So basically, I'm giving it that database context. Okay, identity role. You realize that in most of your applications, you're going to have different roles. So you can have someone acting as a teacher and someone acting as a parent. So the parent shouldn't be able to access certain pages that are only for teachers. And the way you control that is by using roles. So you can check a user's role and find out which role that user is before allowing them to access certain functionality. So that's why we need identity role. So it just gives us that separation of, okay, this person is this person and that person is that person. Fine, so with all of this, we should be ready to work with add users to our database. Yeah, so we need to go in and create our database. And to create our database, we're going to run some commands. I anticipate that this first command is going to fail because I haven't installed certain things on my system. But let's just run it anyway. .NET EF migrations add initial migration. As usual, I'll explain what this does after running it. Okay, so I have not installed the entity framework core package. I don't think I've asked you guys to install it either. So I'm just going to go here and say install EF core tools. And then, so there are certain command line tools you need to work with entity framework core. And the truth is, if you're using Visual Studio for this, you won't learn this. So Visual Studio comes pre-installed with all of these tools and all of these things. And you're really just clicking about and running commands, and you don't know what is happening underneath. So entity framework tools allow your C# application to interface with the database engine. And if you're using something as stripped down as Visual Studio Code, you'd have to do all of this yourself. So just to run this command, this is a run once command. Once I install EF tools, it's available for me to use all through my project. Now I can run this command again. I still anticipate it's going to fail. Well, let's see. EF Nugget, are you talking about the EF Nugget or the EF tool? And yes, yes, you have to install the Nugget package when you're working with, because that's how your application knows you're going to use. Okay, so we see that it's giving an error. Yes, you have to. So we see that it gives an error, but this error is very descriptive. It says your application doesn't reference Microsoft.entity framework code or design. So it's saying, hey, we need this thing to be able to actually create your database tables. So like before, we just say .NET add package and just type in that. Yes, you have to. I understand what you're saying, not VS Code. You have to install the tool. And then if that's, I don't anticipate any challenges now, but let's see. I think there's one more package we need to add. Come on. Okay, so it created, so it says build succeeded, blah, blah, blah. Now, so what just happened? What happened is that it added some files to our project. And if we go to our project, we see we have a new folder here called migrations. And if I open up migrations, I see I have a class. And you really don't need to worry about all of this. These are just classes it needs to create our database. So if you've watched the database tutorial I did, I told you guys that you can go into SSMS and create a database and create your tables and create all of that. But when you're working with C#, you don't really have to do that. You can do everything from code. So I'm just going to wait for SSMS to open and illustrate what I mean. What you do is you create your data context. You create your data context class, like we did. You create your entities folder. So these are important things to remember. You create your entity folder. You create your application user class. Remember to inherit from identity user if you want to use that class to store user information. You go to your startup. I mean, it might look like a lot, but it really isn't. Come into startup, do this registration, do this registration. So this registration lets your application know that, okay, we're using a database. This one lets it know that, okay, we're using identity. Is anyone trying to join? Okay, so this one lets it know, okay, we're using identity. And then these ones let it know, okay, we're doing some authorization and authentication stuff here. And then after that, you go and you run your migration and it creates the migration. And where's SSMS? Why is it taking so long? Come on. Okay, so it's coming up. Awesome. So I'm just going to connect. So I'm going to connect to local DB because I installed the same local DB you guys installed. I'll connect. Are you not connecting? Okay, I think it has connected. Now I want you guys to take note of something. In my databases, in my list of databases here, I still have the students DB I used in my last example, and that's the only database I have here, except the system databases of course. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here after running my migrations. I'm going to say .NET EF database updates. So I'll just run this simple command, and what's going to happen is it's going to take those migration files it created and use them to go into my database and create a table with all the necessary. It's going to create a table with all the necessary, create a database with the necessary tables and the fields and all of that. So I don't have to go into my database and do all of that manually. Let's just wait for this to finish running. The database video has been on the channel for a while now. So let's just wait for this to finish running. I anticipate some errors here. I haven't done this in a while, so I don't know if the relevant tools are on my laptop. Well, okay, done, there's no errors. I'm going to come in here and click here and say refresh. And look what's happened. Now I have a demo web app database here. So what happened is it came into my database, it went into my database, created a table, created a database with all of the tables that I need, right? So I have several tables here. I have ASP.NET users. This is the important one. This is a table that's going to hold my user information. I'll select top 1000 rows. And we see that there's no data here currently, but what we know is that we have our database that's ready to work with our system and all of that. So we can essentially go into our application now and create users. Awesome. So let's return to our controller and just continue what we were doing. Does anyone have any questions? Do you not understand what we're doing? Okay, I have to configure my database name. So I configured my database name in my application JSON. So this is when you see this database equals demo web app. So whatever database name you want to use, you can just change it here. So you just change the database name here. But remember to use the name that is not already in your database engine. So if a front-end person wants to test the function of the app, so they basically have to set up a database. So normally, every team member has to have a database on his own system, his own local database. You do need a database on your system to work, so they just pull the project, they'll configure the connection string to point to their own database on their system, and then they run the app. And yeah, so the database names, it's automatically created the database names, but you can change it if you want. But this is the normal convention with identity. So identity creates, these are the names identity uses. And if I'm working in a C# project and I need to execute queries against my databases, these are the names I expect to find: ASP.NET users, ASP.NET user roles, and all of that. So there's really, although you can, there really is no need to change it. When you create your own tables that will hold your own data, you can change that. Awesome. So Angela wants to say something. Angela, please, you can go on.
Okay. The way you created the database in the Visual Studio. When I was doing mine, because I was in Visual Studio, I created the database separately in Management Studio, right? And then I went to Visual Studio, and then I went to, I think, Server Explorer or something, and I added it there. But it turned out that whenever I close Visual Studio and open it again, the database is no longer there. I have to add it again.
Exactly. So that's the thing. You really, I see a lot of resources online, right, that don't exactly they're just unnecessarily convoluted. And at the end of the day, you might think, oh, because I'm just clicking things, it might feel easier. But at the end of the day, you're losing a lot of necessary knowledge or content. It's just easier for you to know what you're doing. So with this one, your database is always going to be here. In fact, my database and my Visual Studio codes, they're not in any way linked. The only thing they know about each other is the connection string. So the only thing my application knows about my database now is the connection string.
Okay.
So I think you should follow this pattern. when you've created all of this and done this configuration, come here, type the command. It's not too difficult to remember. If you need the command, I can
Okay.
so type .NET EF migrations, add your migration. If it succeeds, then .NET EF database update. It goes in and it creates a database for you. It's a much easier workflow for me.
Okay, so and the application is sticking with that database. So even if I close,
even if you close the application and open it back, as long as this connection string does not change, as long as this connection does not change, it's going to use the same database.
All right. Thank you.
So let's continue. So what we're able to achieve is we're able to get this stuff in here, right? But now we want to actually create the table. For this, we're going to you're going to see a concept for the first time called dependency injection. And just watch, I'll explain what's going on. Public. Some of you probably already know what a controller is. Account controller. Sorry, what a constructor is. So this is the constructor. The difference between this and this, if you notice, is there's no return type. So it's just public and the name of the class. This and the name of the class is identical. It is called a constructor. And then when you run your project, this method is the first to run in this class. So this is the first method to run, and we can pass in necessary information for it. For example, there's a class in C# called the user manager. The user manager is necessary, is what we use for creating different users or basically interact with users in our application. So I can just come here and I can pass in my user manager. User manager of application user, and then I'll say user manager, and then I just create a reference to it here. Private read only user manager. While I'm typing, if you have questions, you can just drop it in the chat box or something. I need to bring in some using statements here. And then don't forget to do this, if not you're going to have an error. So you say user manager equals user manager. So what I'm doing here is I created an instance of user manager that I'm going to be using in this class, and then I passed in a user, an instance, and I just assigned them. We'll probably do a video where we talk about what is going on here in depth, but for now, this works. So after bringing in our model here, what we're going to do is I'm going to say, I want to create a new application user. So I'll say application user equals new application user, right? And I'm going to use this. So, and C# has a lot of very cool stuff you can use. And as for working, I'm just going to be using some of them. So I'll fill in the username for this application user. It's going to be model.email. So I want the username to be the email this person passed in. No, it's not. So user manager comes with identity. It comes with C#, so you can just use it. It helps you to work with users. So immediately you do this registration. So immediately you do this services.add identity, user manager becomes available for you to use. It just by default, it knows you're going to use user manager. So it makes it available to your application. And then I'll say username, then email, I'll say, so most of us C# devs just set the username and email to the same thing. But if you're making an application where the username, like Twitter, where the username should be different from the linked email, then in your create user request model, you would add the username property here. But most C# developers just use the email for username and password. So I have this. Now what I can do is after creating my application user, I can come here and see user manager dot create user async. I'll create async, and I can pass in the application user I want to create. I'll pass in user, and then what password do I want this user to have? Remember, I passed in that password in the model. I'll say model.password. I have to await this. This isn't the concept we've talked about. We'll just know it's really out of scope for you guys. So at this stage, most instructors will tell you to just use it. And we're going to clarify as we go ahead. Can only be used public, okay. Async task. So what we're doing here is we're taking this user. The problem is we're not really checking if someone with this username already exists or not. We're just going ahead and we're creating it. But we're just going to do this for now. So there are different ways to do this. The application user, give me a second, please. I'm going to mute myself. I'll be back in a jiff.
God.
Oh boy. C#
Voila,
again.
God.
Like magic.
God.
It's way.
Just achieve this within 2 days.
Oh boy, where is
Yeah.
Booker for real? Boy, now you, boss.
How not they now?
Presentation is on the 26th. So presentation is on the 26th. Better
That's
be
what they
ready.
talk.
They will present 20 something now.
That's what
They will present the front end.
Okay, guys. So someone asked about how I was initializing the application user. The truth is, you could say application user equals new application user, and then close it, and then go to say user dot email equals model. It's just the same thing I do, and say user dot whatever, and say user dot username. It's just shorter, right? It's exactly the same thing. So what I have up here is exactly the same thing with what I have down here. This is just a neater syntax to me. So that's why I'm doing this. So I just create that and I pass it in here, right? And I create, and then most times when you create a new user, you just redirect them to a different page, right? I'll say redirect to action. So I'm trying to, so a lot of times when you log in, so guys, just remember if this ends, just rejoin. So I'll say return redirect to action. I'll pass in the controller name I want to return, I think. String action name, string controller name. So I'll go to my home view index. Go to
or probably,
yeah.
I said, or probably the login page.
Okay, yeah, going to the login page is fine. But we don't have the login page yet, so we just have a create user page now. So I say redirect to action, I just redirect you to index home, and that's fine, right? And we just test this out after. I'm going to end the meeting now, so we can test this out when we're back.